this is a work that Dylan Thomas wrote, great Welsh writer. He would have been a great anything writer. He happened to be Welsh. And Mr. Coleman was once a student at Wichita State. He forgets it now and then, but he did. And we used to do it every Christmas. We had a party with the theater people, mostly in the lounge. And since I didn't have any tickets to go to Brahms for the kids, so the best I could do was to read them a story. And so we started years ago reading Child's Christmas in Wales, and now I've got an extended family here, so to speak, and so this is what it is. As Becky mentioned, I did not wear my glasses today, but I think I can get through it all right. We'll give it a try. One Christmas is so much like another in those years around the sea-town corner, now and out of sound except the distant speaking of the voices I sometimes hear a moment before I sleep, that I can never remember whether it snowed for 6 days and 6 nights when I was 12 years old, or whether it snowed for 12 days and 12 nights when I was 6 years old. It was to us. All the Christmases ran down toward the two-tongued sea like a cold and headlong moon, bundling down the sky that was our street. And they stop at the rim of the ice-edged, fish-freezing waves, and I plunge my hands into the snow and bring out whatever I can find. In goes my hand into the wool-white bell-tongued ball of holidays resting on the rim of the carol-singing sea, and out comes Mrs. Prothero and the firemen. It was on the afternoon of the day of Christmas Eve, and I was in Mrs. Prothero's garden waiting for cats with her son Jim. It was snowing. It was always snowing at Christmas. December, in my memory, is white as Lapland, although there were no reindeers. But there were cats. Patient, cold, and callous, our hands wrapped in socks, we waited to snowball the cats. Sleek and long as jaguars, and horrible whiskered, spitting and snarling, they would slink and stow over the white back garden walls, and the lynx-eyed hunters, that's Jim and I, fur-capped, moccasin trappers from Hudson's Bay, just off Mumbles Road, would hurl our deadly snowballs at the green of their eyes. The wise cats never appeared. We were so still, Eskimo-footed Arctic marksmen in the muffling silence of that eternal snow. Eternal ever since Wednesday. That we never heard Mrs. Prothero's first cry from her igloo at the bottom of the garden. Or if we heard it at all, it was to us like the far-off challenge of our enemy and prey, the neighbor's polar cat. But soon the voice grew louder. "Fire!" cried Mrs. Prothero, and she beat the dinner gong. And we ran down the garden with the snowballs in our arms toward the house, and smoke indeed was pouring out of the dining room, and the gong was bombulating, and Mrs. Prothero was announcing ruin like the town crier in Pompeii. Oh, this was better than all the cats in Wales. We bounded into the house, laden with snowballs, and stopped at the open door of the smoke-filled room. Something was burning, all right. Perhaps it was Mr. Prothero. He always slept there after midday dinner with a newspaper over his face. But no, he was standing in the middle of the room saying, "A fine Christmas, and smacking at the smoke with a slipper. "Call the fire brigade!" cried Mrs. Prothero, and she beat the gong. "They won't be here," said Mr. Prothero. "It's Christmas." There was no fire to be seen, only clouds of smoke, and Mr. Prothero standing in the middle of them, waving his slipper as if he was conducting. "Do something," he said. And we threw all our snowballs into the smoke. I think we missed Mr. Prothero. And then we ran out of the house to the telephone box. "Let's call the police as well," Jim said. "Oh, and the ambulance. Oh, and Ernie Jenkins, he likes fires." But we only called the fire brigade, and soon the fire engine came, and 3 tall men in helmets brought a hose into the house, and Mr. Prothero got out just in time before they turned it on. Nobody could have had a noisier Christmas Eve. And when the firemen turned off the hose and were standing in the wet, smoky room, Jim's aunt, Miss Prothero, came downstairs and peered in at them. Jim and I waited very quietly to hear what she would say to them. She said the right thing always. She looked at the 3 tall firemen in their shining helmets, standing among the smoke and cinders and dissolving snowballs, and she said, "Would you like anything to read?" Years and years and years and years ago, when I was a boy, when there were wolves in Wales, and birds the color of red flannel petticoats whisked past the harp-shaped hills, when we sang and wallowed all day and night in caves that smelled like Sunday afternoons in damp front farmhouse parlors, and we chased with the jawbones of deacons the English and the bears, before the motor car, before the wheel, before the duchess-faced horse, when we rode the daft and happy hills bareback, it snowed and snowed. But here, a small boy says, "It snowed last year, too. I made a snowman, and my brother knocked it down, and I knocked my brother down, and then we had tea." But, no, I said, but that was not the same snow. Our snow was not only shaken from whitewashed buckets down the sky. It came shawling up out of the ground and swam and drifted out of the arms and hands and bodies of the trees. Snow grew overnight on the roofs of the houses like a pure and grandfather mist. Minutely white-ivied the walls and settled on the postman, opening the gate like a dumb, numb thunderstorm of white, torn Christmas cards. Were there postmen then, too? Oh, with sprinkling eyes and wind-cherried noses, on spread frozen feet, they crunched up to the doors and mittened on them manfully. But all that the children could hear was a ringing of the bell. You mean the postman went rat-a-tat-tat and the door rang? No. I mean the bells that the children could hear were inside them. Well, I only hear thunder sometimes, never bells. Oh, there were church bells, too. Inside them? No, in the bat-black, snow-white belfries, tugged by bishops and storks. And they rang their tidings over the bandaged town, over the frozen foam of the powder and ice cream hills, over the crackling sea. It seemed that all the churches boomed for joy under the window, and the weathercocks crew for Christmas on our fence. Get back to the postman. Well, they were just ordinary postmen, fond of walking and dogs and Christmas and snow. They knocked on our door with blue knuckles. Ours got a black knocker. And then they stood on the white welcome mat in the drifted little porches, and they huffed and they puffed, making ghosts with their breath, and joggled from foot to foot like small boys wanting to go out. And then the presents. And then the presents. After the Christmas box. And the cold postman with the rose on his button nose tingled down the tea tray's slithered run of the chilly glittering hill. He went in his ice-bound boots like a man on fishmonger's slabs. He wagged his bag like a frozen camel's hump. And he turned dizzily around the corner on one foot, and by God, he was gone. Get back to the presents. Well, there were useful presents. Engulfing mufflers of the old coach days, and mittens made for giant sloths. Zebra scarfs of a substance like silky gum that could be tug-of-war down to the goulashes. There were blinding tam-o'-shanters like patchwork tea cozies, and bunny-suited busbies and balaclavas for victims of head-shrinking tribes. Those are from aunts who always wore wool next to the skin, and they were mustached in rasping vests that made you wonder why the aunts had any skin left at all. Once I had a little crocheted nose bag from an aunt, now, alas, no longer whinnying among us. Oh, and pictureless books in which small boys, though warned with quotations not to, would skate on Farmer Giles' pond and did and drowned. And books that told me everything about the wasp, except why. Go on to the useless presents. There were bags and bags of moist and many-colored jelly babies, and a folded flag, and a false nose, and a tram conductor's cap, and a machine that punched tickets and rang a bell. Never a Capulet, a catapult, never a catapult. But once, by mistake, that no one could explain, a little hatchet. Oh, and there was a celluloid duck that when you pressed it, made a most unduck-like sound. A mewing moo, like an ambitious cat might make who wished to be a cow. Oh, and there was a painting book in which I could make the grass, the trees, the sky, the animals, any color I pleased. And still, the dazzling sky blue sheep are grazing in a red field under the rainbow-billed and pea-green birds. There were hard boils and toffee and fudge and all sorts. Crunches, cracknels, humbugs, glaciers, marzipan, and butter Welsh for the Welsh. Oh, and troops of bright tin soldiers who, if they could not fight, could always run. And there were snakes and families and happy ladders. And easy hobby games for little engineers, complete with instructions. Oh, easy hobby games, easy for Leonardo. Oh, and there was a whistle to make the dogs bark, to wake up the old man next door and make him beat on the wall with his stick and shake the pictures off the wall. And a packet of cigarettes. You put one in the corner of your mouth, and you stood at the corner of the street, and you waited for hours in vain for an old lady to scold you for smoking a cigarette, and then, with a smirk, you ate it. Oh, and then there was breakfast under the balloons. Were there uncles like in our house? There are always uncles at Christmas. The same uncles. And on Christmas mornings, with dog-disturbing whistle and sugar fags, I would scour the Swats town for the news of the little world and find always a dead bird by the white post office or by the deserted swings, perhaps a robin, all but one of his fires out. Men and women wading or scooping back from chapel with taproom noses and wind-bust cheeks, all albinos, huddle their stiff, black, jarring feathers against the irreligious snow. Mistletoe hung from the gas brackets in all the four parlors. There was sherry and walnuts. There was bottled beer and crackers by the dessert spoons, and cats in their furabouts watched the fires. And the high-heaped fires spat, all ready for the chestnuts and the mully pokers. Some few large men sat in the front parlors without their collars. Uncles, almost certainly, trying their new cigars, holding them out judiciously at arm's length, returning them to their mouths, coughing, and then holding them out again as though waiting for the explosion. And there were some few small ants, not wanted in the kitchen or anywhere else for that matter, sat on the very edge of their chairs, poised and brittle, afraid to break, like faded cups and saucers. Not many of those mornings trod the piling streets. An old man, always, fawn-bouldered, yellow-gloved, and at this time of year, with spats of snow, would take his constitutional to the white bowling green and back, and he would take it wet or fine on Christmas Day or Doomsday. Sometimes two hale young men with big pipes blazing, no overcoats, and wind-blown scarfs would trudge unspeaking down to the forlorn sea to work up an appetite, to blow away the fumes, who knows, to walk into the waves till nothing of them was left but the two curling smoke clouds of their inextinguishable briars. And then I would be slapdashing home. The gravy smell of the dinners of others, the bird smell, the brandy, the pudding and mince coiling in my nostrils, when out of a snow-clogged side lane would come a boy the spit of me, with a pink-tipped cigarette and the violet past of a black eye, cocky as a bullfinch, leering all to himself. I hated him on sight and would be about to put my dog whistle to my lips and blow him off the face of Christmas when suddenly he, with a violet wink, put his whistle to his lips and blew so stridently, so high, so exquisitely loud that gobbling faces, their cheeks bulged with goose, would press against the tinsel windows the whole length of the white echoing street. Oh, for dinner. For dinner we had pudding and blazing pudding and turkey, and after dinner the uncles sat in front of the fire, loosened all their buttons, put their large moist hands over their watch chains, groaned a little, and slept. Mothers, aunts, and sisters scuttled to and fro, bearing tureens. Auntie Bessie, who had already been frightened twice by a clockwork mouse, whimpered at the sideboard and had some elderberry wine. The dog was sick. Auntie Dozy had to have 3 aspirins, but Auntie Hannah, who liked port, stood in the middle of the snowbound backyard singing like a big bosom thrush. I would blow up balloons to see how big they would blow up to, and when they burst, which they always did, the uncles jumped and rumpled. In the rich and heavy afternoon, the uncles breathing like dolphins and the snow descending, I would sit among festoons and Chinese lanterns and nibble dates and try to make a model man of war, following the instructions for little engineers. And I would produce what might be mistaken for a seagoing tram car. Or I would go out, my bright new boots squeaking in the white world, on to the seaward hill, to call on Jim and Dan and Jack, and to pad through the still streets, leaving huge, deep footprints on the hidden pavements. I bet people will think there have been hippos. What would you do if you saw a hippo coming down the street? Oh, I'd go like this, bang. I'd throw him over the railings, and then I would roll down the hill, and then I would tickle him under the ear, and he'd wag his tail. What would you do if you saw two hippos? Iron-flanked and bellowing like hippos, clanked and battered through the scudding snow toward us as we passed Mr. Daniel's house. Let's post Mr. Daniel a snowball in his letterbox. Let's write things on the snow. Let's write, Mr. Daniel looks like a spaniel all over it. Or sometimes we walked onto the white shore. Can the fishes see it snowing? The silent one-clouded heavens drifted onto the sea, and now we were some snow-blind travelers lost in the North Hills, and vast dewlap dogs with flasks round their necks mumbled and shambled up to us, baying, "Excelsior." We returned home through the poor streets where only a few children fumbled with bare red fingers in the wheel-rutted snow. And catcalled after us, their voices fading away as we trudged up hills into the cries of the docks, the birds and the hooting of ships out in the whirling bay. And then at tea, the recovered uncles would be jolly, and the ice cake loomed in the center of the table like a marble grave. Auntie Hannah laced her tea with rum because it was only once a year. Bring out now the tall tales that we told by the fire as the gaslight bubbled like a diver. Ghosts whistled like owls in the long nights when I dared not look over my shoulder. Animals lurked in the cubby holes under the stairs where the gas meter ticked. And I remember that we went singing carols once, when there wasn't the shaving of a moon to light the flying streets. At the end of a long road was a drive that led to a large house, and we stumbled up in the darkness of the drive, each one of us afraid, each one of us holding a stone in his hand in case, and all of us too brave to say a word. The wind through the trees made noises as of old and unpleasant, and maybe web-footed men wheezing in caves. We reached the black hulk of the house. What shall we give him? Hark the Herald? No, Jack said, Good King Wenceslas. I'll count 3. 1, 2, 3, and we began to sing, our voices high and seemingly distant in the snow-felted darkness around the house that was occupied by nobody we knew. We stood close together near the dark door. Good King Wenceslas looked out on the feast of Stephen. What? And then a small, dry voice, like the voice of someone who has not spoken for a long time, joined our singing. A small, dry, eggshell voice from the other side of the door, a small, dry voice through the keyhole. And when we stopped running, we were outside my house. And the front room was lovely. Balloons floated under the hot water bottle, gulping gas. Everything was good again and showed over the town. Jim said, perhaps it was a ghost. Dan said, perhaps it was trolls. Dan was always reading. Well, let's go and see if there's any jelly left, Jack said, and we did that. Always on Christmas night there was music. An uncle played the fiddle, a cousin sang Cherry Ripe, and another uncle sang Drake's Drum. It was very warm in the little house. Auntie Hannah, who had got on to the parsnip wine, sang a song about bleeding hearts and death. And then another in which she said her heart was like a bird's nest. And then everybody laughed again, and then I went to bed. Looking through my bedroom window out onto the moonlit and unending smoke-colored snow, I could see the lights in the windows of all the other houses on our hill and hear the music rising from them up the long, steadily fading night. I turned the gas down. I got into bed. I said some words to the close and holy darkness, and then I slept.